Welcome to Groundwater Talk Live. I'm your host, the Groundwater Guy, Tom Ballard, and today we're going to talk about the California Water Supply Plan. Is it too little, too late? So we're gonna chat about that a little bit. California's had their chance for 20 years or more to get this right, and they've dragged their feet, and so are they going to be able to do it now? So that's what we're going to talk about today. They've actually issued a plan. That's what this looks like. It just came out about a week ago, I think, but it's dated August 20 of 22, and so it's entitled California's Water Supply Strategy Adapting to a Hotter, Drier Future. And so really what they're making about it, climate change and all that, which is all well and good, but there's some things in there that really they should have been done quite a while ago, and they're just kind of getting around to it. There's some wording in there that kind of soft pedal some of this stuff, but really in reality this should have been done a long time ago. So are they going to be able to pull this off by changing course right now? So before we get going here, if you can drop a comment and chat, I'd appreciate it. All the comments, the likes, the shares really help the algorithm get this out to other people, and we want some more people to participate in the show and be able to view this and get the information, and I love feedback anyway. So it's sometimes just sitting here and being a talking head, it can be a little challenging. So having feedback from folks watching and commenting and sharing is pretty awesome. So all right, so let's dive in here. We're going to talk about the California water strategy, and I wanted to go over some news articles first that have announced this. California has really basically their strategy has been a strategy of conservation and trying to get people to conserve water, and they've really dug their feet on things like water storage, capturing stormwater runoff. There's an incredible amount of water every precipitation event that runs off to the ocean that they don't capture, and so it's really quite challenging. Plus things like you have a real quagmire of environmental regulations in California that make it difficult to do almost anything. And so we'll see, as they talk about in this water supply strategy, is they're going to talk about trying to streamline regulations. That is going to be challenging to do because there's so many of them, and it makes it, especially for things like dams and storage, makes it almost impossible to do some of the things we did back in the 50s when they were building dams and creating storage and creating all the infrastructure that we still have today that's outdated, that needs to be updated. You could not do that today based on the regulations. So huge stumbling block is these regulations, and then the attitude that's really been biased against additional dams and storage, a very pro and environmental conservation attitude. We got to have the environmental flows to the stream for the delta smelt and the salmon, and that takes priority over drinking water and water for agriculture. So it's really going to take a shift. I'm not totally, bottom line, spoiler alert, is I'm not totally convinced California has it within them to make this shift based on what they're saying here. But we're going to go over it, and we can always hope, because if they don't do something, they're in severe trouble. And quite frankly, I think a lot of this stuff, even if you they've kind of padded the wording. We'll talk about that a little bit, but even if you start on this stuff today, it's going to take years to get that done, and it's just it could be too little, too late, and thus the topic of the talk today. So let's dive in a little bit and look at some of the news articles that are out there. This is the first one. This is from the CBS News. California governor announces aggressive $8 billion plan to boost water supply. And this is basically just an announcement of the water supply plan. So they have their obligatory pictures of dry river beds and dead quaking aspen trees And so they just talk about that here, and a picture of an inspirational picture of Gavin Newsom, all of a sudden coming around. And so they talk a little bit about that here. There's another one here. This is from Reuters, uh, with the obligatory picture of a dry reservoir and the boat. Dramatic pictures, and some videos going on that. But it's basically the same thing, talking about the new water supply strategy. And so they go through this, and we'll go through this in great detail. But it is making the news, and so we're going to go through this in a little more detail. But a lot, obviously it's newsworthy because it potentially, and I say potentially, represents a shift in strategy from conservation to providing more storage and more water. So now a lot of this ties back into the California water resilience portfolio that is kind of their roadmap. They've been tweaking this, but a lot of the things that are in here and a lot of the things that are in the water supply strategy, I'm skeptical that it's going to get done. Especially streamlining regulations, very challenging to do. Overcoming things like the Coastal Commission's incredibly conservative, conservative in terms of environmental regulations, bias towards the coast, that they just turned down the big water desalination plant, seawater desalination plant in Huntington Beach, and that was a big one and huge blow to California's water supply. So are they going to be able to overcome that? But this has been the guiding document here, and and but we're seeing this water supply strategy actually adding to that, and this is basically what that looks like, and the link here is it is resources.ca.gov, and you can find it there. You can just search for California Water Supply Strategy online. It's a PDF document, 19 pages that you can download that summarizes things. So let's look at that document in a little bit more detail here. That's the subject of our talk today. So this is the cover of the document, and we're going to go through this in a little more detail and discuss what it includes, what it doesn't include, and where I'm a little skeptical on things. But we shall see. But like I say, most of these things I think are going to be, it's going to take years to implement a lot of this stuff, and it's going to be challenging to get it done and provide the water that California needs. So California's really in trouble with this, and they got to do something. But whether they can overcome their natural inclination to just bog everything down in regulatory red tape, we shall see. That would be a big sea change in attitude to get beyond that. It's easy to talk about. In actual practice, much more difficult to do. So anyway, this plan, the water supply strategy plan, actually starts off with a bow to climate change, and that we got to change with climate change, and getting into that. And then they've patted themselves on the back for all their water bond portfolios that they've earmarked for modernizing water infrastructure and management and storage, things that in reality they've done very little on. They've spent a lot of money planning and running around and talking about stuff, but not much has actually been done to get this stuff approved and through the regulatory process. So they may argue differently, but the reality is none of this stuff is actually getting done that they're patting themselves on the back for right here. So we're telling it like it is here, as a matter of fact. So and they point out that the 2023 budget includes an additional $2.8 billion for drought relief to hard-hit communities, water conservation, environmental protection for fish and wildlife, and the key thing is long-term projects to permanently strengthen drought resilience. and what that actually consists of is very heavy on the conservation end of things. So, and then they're talking about climate change again, but so here's kind of the summary of the summary. To ensure California has the water needed for generations to come, they want to create additional storage space to up to 4 million acre feet of water. That is a significant amount of storage. And this is kind of where the challenge has been in the past, is looking at some of these reservoir projects and increasing storage has just run into these environmental hurdles. And quite frankly, most of the people in the state government have had very little taste for creating additional storage, because they know they're going to run into resistance from environmental groups, and and it becomes a challenge, and their bias is that direction. So so really, they end up talking about it, but they end up dragging their feet in so that it doesn't actually get done. So this water supply strategy is pushing this. I Like I say, I am skeptical, but I'm going to show you what they're presenting here. I'm really hoping they've had a change of attitude. I think it may be too late to do a lot of this stuff, but because they're going to have some severe problems before it actually gets done. But let's hope they've actually changed. Another big area is recycling and reusing at least 800,000 acre feet of water per year by 2030. And this is going to consist of wastewater, processed wastewater, and capturing stormwater. So that's going to help a lot, free up an additional 500,000 acre feet of water through more efficient water use and conservation. That's the conservation component. You always have to have a conservation component, and I am not against a conservation component. Don't get me wrong on that, but conservation as your sole strategy seldom works. And we've seen the problem with conservation is, unless you make it mandatory, most people will conserve for a while, and then they get tired of it, and then they start cheating, and then you're right back to where you were. So voluntary conservation has kind of a expiration date where people will comply, and then they get tired of taking 2-minute showers, and they go back to taking nice long hot showers that they enjoy, and so it kind of falls by the wayside. So unless you're going to do mandatory draconian water conservation, and that still doesn't work because you're still coming from a point of scarcity. So water conservation as a sole strategy just does not work to solve these problems. So so here's our stormwater capture. I kind of jumped the gun on that a little bit earlier, but make new water available by capturing stormwater. This has been a huge problem in California. They just have not been very efficient at capturing stormwater. And then desalination is a big part of that. They've had some huge regulatory hurdles with this as well. And then brackish water, salty water in groundwater basins is the deeper you go, the more brackish the water gets, and it gets a high amount of total dissolved solids, or TDS, and it becomes undrinkable. So that needs to be processed out as well to deal with that water. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of that, but they are looking at that, and that would there's a lot of groundwater out there that is brackish or salty, that's not available, the deeper stuff, and quite a bit of that actually, but it's not been able to be used because there's no good way to really treat that. So, and the most efficient way to treat that is through a reverse osmosis or desalination type of process, and desalination is mainly reverse osmosis. So, but you have to deal with the brines, because you're going to produce a very salty brine. And if you're on the coast, for instance, then you can basically have these pipelines way out in the ocean and dump your brines out there, and they supposedly get diluted to the point where it's not going to affect the fish. When you're inland trying to deal with groundwater, what do we do with these brines? And that is one of the challenges that they're going to have to overcome to come up with any significant amount of processing of brackish water from groundwater basins. What do you do with the brines? So that is a technological challenge they need to overcome. So so they're stating the obvious here. California must move smarter and faster to update our water systems. That's, what we would call Captain Obvious here, and something that California has absolutely not been doing. They've been dragging their feet. They haven't been smart about what they're doing. They've been prioritizing the wrong things. They've been prioritizing conservation over improving the water systems and increasing storage. So let's hope this is really about a reality, and they're being in reality they're being drugged kicking and screaming into what really needs to be done. So will it actually happen? That's my skepticism, and you'll hear that throughout. So. So and then they boldface this. The modernization of our water systems will help replenish the water California will lose to hotter, drier weather and generate enough water for more than 8.4 million households. Well, hotter, dry, and drier weather notwithstanding, we still have the water we need to have available for the population and for agriculture. There's some notable things that are not addressed in this water supply plan that I will point out. And one is the population. California has too many people. I don't know how you deal with that. That's just, you can't tell people they can't move in, but the available water supply is not adequate to the way the system is run right now. Let me put it that way, is not adequate to service the population. And if it continues to grow, then this is where you're going to have real problems. So they're talking about 8.4 million households. If California grows, that's going to be even more, and you're going to have insufficient water supplies the way the water system is managed now. So that's the challenge there. All right. So moving on, once again, they talk about climate change. They're talking about capturing water that's lost to evaporation, and this is true. You have storage out there, you have water reservoirs, there's a lot of evaporation that goes on, so there's a loss of the water resources from evaporation. That's a natural situation. So they're talking about how can they reduce evaporation. They're attributing that over the next 20 years, California could lose 10% of its water supplies. Basically due to lack of precipitation, but also evaporative losses. So, and they point out in previous droughts, the ratio of precipitation to evaporation to runoff has been similar, but as temperatures rise, evaporation increases, and the consequences of a fall of runoff will catch up to them. So they need to deal with the evaporation, and there are a lot of things that are experimental that they're looking at to reduce the evaporation rate on these reservoirs. They do monitor all that, so it's important to look at that too. But nothing. There is no real game changer in that environment right now. I read the news regularly about different techniques they're using for that, and that's challenging. So. Okay, so, and they do talk about California's precipitation has always swung between drought and flood, so lack of abundance and overabundance is really what that comes down to. So, and so we can expect that we're probably going to get some flood years too. So that's going to be a huge danger coming down the pike. And some people are worried about that. When the rains finally come back, are they going to be torrential rains? And then we're going to go from lack of precipitation to flooding. So the volume of water used by people in California for agriculture, urban, and environmental purpose ranges from 60 million acre feet per year to 90 million acre feet per year. So that's really what we're looking at here, and uh, that is part of the challenge. Is you're adding, if you're losing 10% of that, now you're looking at 6 to 9 million acre feet of water you're using per year. Some of the numbers they're talking about here are hold on just a minute. We got a troll that's coming on, and I need to fix that. Let me see here. All right. Troll is gone. They're trolling my YouTube channel, so um, we keep those challenges up. So um, anyway, uh, just spam stuff. All right, so we're talking about if you're losing 10%, that's 6 to 9 million acre feet per year. That's pretty significant, and it doesn't even begin to account for what they're talking about adding here. So there's some challenges ahead. So um, California's largest reservoir, Shasta, holds 4.5 million acre feet as a comparison. Shasta, they can raise the dam at Shasta, add some of that capacity, but Shasta is a federally operated reservoir, so the California is going to have to work with the feds on that. So the Bureau of Reclamation, and so that coordination needs to be there too. That really hasn't happened in the past, so hopefully that'll happen. So, all right, so diving in a little more. How California is taking action to protect water community supplies. This is the gist of the plan, and there's really 4 areas here. Develop new water through recycling and desalination is number 1. Number 2, capture and save more stormwater above ground and below ground. So that's capturing it in reservoirs and putting it into spreading basins, and then groundwater recharge projects is what we're looking at. The conservation element, number 3 is reducing use of water in cities and on farms. And number 4 is improve all water management actions with better data, forecasting, conveyance, and administration of water rights. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's something significant they leave out of this that is kind of the elephant in the room, and they need to address that, and it is not addressed in here. So, all right. So number 1, develop new water supply strategies, and 1.1 is reuse at least 800,000 acre feet of water per year by 2030 and 1.8 million acre feet by 2040, with most of that additional recycling involving direct wastewater discharges that are now going to the ocean. So they have some illustrations in here showing this, but basically what it comes down to is you have increased recycled wastewater going from 0.8 million acre feet to 1.8 million acre feet by 2040. And so they're hoping in 2030 to have about 5 million acre feet from all these sources and about 7 million acre feet in 2040. So that's part of the plan. 3.7 million acre feet of that will be expanding storage above and below ground. So this is good, but it's if you really are losing 10%, that's at 6 to 9 million acre feet, and you can see you're only about halfway there with this. So they say currently recycled water offsets about 9% of California state's water demand, or about 728,000 acre feet per year. So they're going to up that, and they've invested 1.8 billion in recycled water projects. Say approximately 1.5 million acre feet per year of treated wastewater is currently discharged to California's ocean. So Not all of that can be recycled, uh, but you need some of that to discharge brine and the wastewater in some areas provides critical stream flow for fish and wildlife. But there can be uses for this. I specifically like the use of treated wastewater for groundwater recharge if you can make that work and you're in the right location because it's going to a lot of people get upset about the toilet to tap thing and it sounds gross but quite frankly the water we're drinking today has been around for a long time. We're drinking the same water the dinosaurs have drank, and so there's been a lot of waste that's been in there and recycled, and so it's nothing new. But the idea of using it for groundwater recharge will really help because it's going to percolate into the ground and you're gonna help recharge the aquifers, especially the shallow aquifers with these spreading basins, and that's probably a really good use of the treated wastewater. So implementation steps: the state will consider greater investments to leverage federal dollars where possible. They have $3.2 billion in financing for water recycling projects. That they've approved for 94 projects since 2012 at roughly $15,000 an acre foot, which is what they're using for their estimation for the cost of water. It would require a state, local, and federal investment of approximately $10 billion to achieve the 2030 goal and $27 billion to achieve the 2040 goal of an additional 1 million acre feet of water. So these are significant investments, and I see some more water bonds in the future. The problem with the water bonds in the past is they really haven't got used effectively. So the water bonds have sat there, been used for something not what they were intended for, storage and that type of thing. So that's been the problem with past water bonds. If they really are going to do it, then it may be a worthwhile investment. But keep in mind that a water bond is a loan. You have to pay interest on that. A lot of people, especially the people in government, forget that. they just see it as money. So, and they go through the different projects. 1.2 here is expand Brackish groundwater desalination projects by 28,000 acre feet per year by 2030 and 84,000 acre feet per year by 2040, and help guide location of seawater desalination projects where they are cost effective and environmentally appropriate. Now, that last phrase has been the big bugaboo. The big stumbling block has been the Coastal Commission. They are very protective of the environment, and they are notorious for turning down a lot of projects, not allowing the projects on the coast. And obviously, the most effective desalination projects are going to be located on the coast and tapping into seawater. So we have a basic conflict here. So some of the attitudes and the policy of the Coastal Commission, the California Coastal Commission, must change in order for that to happen. So, so they talk about there's 14 current seawater desalination projects across the state with a production capacity of 89,000 acre feet per year. Not a whole lot. Some are not operating at full capacity, and we're seeing that they're basically just smaller projects, and they're really a drop in the bucket compared to what could be going on. So there's another 23 brackish groundwater desalination plants with a capacity of 139,627 acre feet per year. They point out that brackish groundwater requires significantly less energy to treat than seawater due to the fact that the salinities are less. So you're going to produce less brine. You're still going to produce brine you're going to have to get rid of, and the brine is concentrated salt, so it's not like you just dump it out there. So you're going to have evaporation basins, and that's going to take some land, and you're going to basically have to basically then recycled out those salts somehow, and so there's a cost to this, both a land cost and an operational cost in desalinating water, because you need to do something with what you've actually desalinated. Um, so they're looking at more of that, and there are some obviously some technological hurdles, but the big problem with the seawater desalination plants on the coast is the Coastal Act that's administered by the California Coastal Commission, and that's been quite a challenge. They are challenging, and as I mentioned earlier, they did not approve the Huntington Beach desalination plant, and that was a big one. So that's caused a lot of problems, and really set the pace for future desalination plants. So something needs to be resolved with the Coastal Commission in order to get these things approved. There's some real environmental regulatory hurdles that need to be overcome for that. So the implementation steps are that they're really going to work with identifying these projects and get them the funding. They're going to try to streamline and expedite permitting. Where have we heard this before? We've heard this numerous times. It never seems to actually happen, or it happens around the edges, and you don't get any significant streamlining or expediting of permits. So as we move more into this, becomes really going from emergency to complete crisis, maybe that'll happen. Once again, I'm skeptical that you'll tinker around the edges, but the impulse is to have this red tape paperwork that's going to bog things down for years and years, and the projects just aren't going to get done. And when they do get done, they cost so much that you just don't they become uneconomic in a lot of cases. So that $15,000 an acre foot could actually be brought down significantly by reducing some of the red tape and hurdles that you have to go through that add to the capital costs on these things. So that would certainly be welcome if they do that. Count me as skeptical whether it actually gets done to any significant degree or not. So they're also going to identify potential mitigation sites, which is basically dealing with the brine, to facilitate the expedited approval of the desalination facilities. We will see if this actually happens. Okay, number 2, expand groundwater storage capacity above and below ground by 4 million acre feet. This is going to be significant. 4 million acre feet does make a big dent in that 10% loss. And they introduce this by saying, well, creating more space to store water in reservoirs and aquifers does not create more precipitation. And they go on to talk about that. But here's the problem: is it's often not precipitation that's the problem. It's the timing of the precipitation. When we get the snowfalls that melt too quickly and you get a lot of runoff, when you get these heavy rainstorms and you get a lot of runoff and it all flushes out to the sea and we don't capture any of it, zero nada capturing it, then you have problems. So that's a timing issue rather than a total precipitation issue. And so there's been some people, and we don't have time to get into all the details here, that have sat down and looked at actual precipitation. And in most years, there's plenty of precipitation. It's just California is not efficiently capturing that precipitation. So there's going to be abnormally dry years with precipitation where you're going to have problems, but you need to be set up to capture the precipitation that you have and not let it just flush out to the ocean and say, oh my, that more needs to be done there. So I'm glad to see they're looking at that, and hopefully this will get done. They're going to 2.1 here is expand average annual groundwater recharge by at least 500,000 acre feet, so 500,000 acre feet. So California has had some challenges with groundwater recharge project, the aquifer storage and recovery. It's the water you put in the ground is subject to the anti-degradation rules, and so even if it's drinking water quality going into the ground is considered to be a contaminant, and so there's some arcane rules that really are slowly being overcome that deal with the water that's injected in the grounds, and so that's been a challenge. So once again, the regulatory red tape, paperwork that drags the timelines of these things out and increases the capital cost to get them done has really been a nightmare. And it would very much welcome if these regulations would some of them would just go away or not apply in this case, and that you could move these things forward faster and less expensively. So they say that local agencies have proposed more than 340 new recharge projects that, if built, could result in as much as 2.2 million acre feet of additional stored water in a single wet year by 2030. This is very welcome. They need to get past the regulatory hurdles. Once again, I'm going to keep beating that to death, but that is the truth. And then they go on. Until those projects are permitted, it is unclear how much water these projects will have the capacity to divert to underground storage. Multiple proposals may rely on the same sources of unappropriated water. So they're saying some of this may be double counted. So your actual results, your mileage may vary, as they say. Your actual results may be less, but so they're trying to be conservative by saying that we're looking at an additional 500,000 acre feet of groundwater storage. So that'll be good because our groundwater aquifers are being overused, and so a lot of these groundwater basins are overdrafted, and so they desperately need the groundwater recharge projects, and we need to make it easier for that to happen. California has the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that requires the implementation of groundwater sustainability plans and overseen by groundwater sustainability agencies. And so these groundwater storage, really aquifer and storage recovery projects need to be a big part of that, and the state needs to make sure that they streamline the regulations to make sure that that can happen. And that's been the challenge. So and they point out here, number one in the implementation steps, right in here, is ensure that groundwater recharge project proponents can successfully navigate the regulatory processes. Certainly a laudable goal. Will it happen? We will see. The state will weigh the following actions. Some would require additional investments and possibly regulatory changes. I would say you should strike that word possibly, and let me, yeah, or yeah, sorry. Strike that word possibly, and just say it's going to require regulatory changes. So they have their strategies here, and that's outlined here. There's incentives. Once again, regulatory streamlining. They talk about it here. The state will streamline water right permits for recharge projects receiving DWR grants or conducted under DWR's flood managed aquifer recharge program. So they're talking about streamlining water rights permits for that. That's part of it. Part of it is just the environmental issues, and they do not talk about that here in any detail. So I'm skeptical that that's going to happen. So there's some powerful lobbies that don't want any compromises on the environmental regulations, and you really need to change some of those things to make the aquifer storage and recovery projects more viable. So 2.2, work with local proponents to complete the 7 Proposition 1 supported storage projects and consider funding other viable surface storage projects. 7 locally driven projects are underway, and I'd put underway in quotation marks, to increase the state's overall capacity to store water by 2.77 million acre feet. By underway, it means they're kind of sort of thinking about it and kind of sort of in the planning stages of these things. So not much is no construction is actually happening. So that's that I'm aware of. There might be, but as far as I'm aware of, basically it's being talked about and kicked around, but and that's what they mean by underway. So healthy dose of skepticism on you have projects actually underway. They're going to need to have a significant push to actually get these things off the dime and get them beyond the planning stage into the implementation stage. So they go on to say that 2 of these 7 projects are likely to begin construction next year. I'm skeptical again on that. So we will see. I'm not sure which 2 they're talking about. I think sites might be one of those, but I'd have to double check on that. So project proponents are working now to obtain permits. That's the that's the big challenge. Arrange financing, finalize environmental documents. That's another challenge, and negotiate contracts with state agencies for the delivery of public benefits from these projects, including environmental flows. Now, once again, environmental flows are those flows that are released to the stream under various regulations to support the fish population and to sustain the stream. So there's a certain amount of water that gets flushed out to sea no matter what, and those are considered the environmental flows. So that you know what that somewhat cryptic term means. So okay, so implementation steps to formalize, streamline, and continue existing efforts. California Natural Resources Agency and the California Environmental Protection Agency will establish an interagency strike team. I love that, strike team, to facilitate state permitting and support completion of these projects. So so they're going to cut back on the donuts or something and slim up to be on the strike team. I don't know, but strike team, just when you talk about regulatory agencies, strike team just does not paint a pretty picture. So it just seems a little interesting terminology there. So I laugh at that. So, and they talk more about how they're going to implement things. Expands San Luis Reservoir by 135,000 acre feet. So San Luis Reservoir is in Merced County. They're going to increase the capacity to capture more winter storm runoff. This is good. This is what we need. So 130,000 acre feet would supply nearly 400,000 homes per year. So it's good. And then 2.4, rehabilitate dams to regain storage capacity. A lot of dams are operating at less than capacity because they're quite frankly not safe because California has put off maintenance. And the Oroville Dam scare we got a few years ago is part of that. But a lot of dams have potential safety issues, so they're actually operating them at less than their available capacity because it's a safety issue. And so this, they're saying the loss of storage is about 350,000 acre feet per year. These dams need to be repaired, and that's just common sense to do that. So it's not even the storage capacity you're talking about. It's a safety issue. So you gain back that storage, yeah, and that's important, but the safety issue should really be driving these things. So by kicking the can down the road and not doing the safety inspections and the maintenance, trying to save a few bucks, just has not paid off well at all. So so DWR is going to apply $100 million to that. So will that be enough? I doubt that. But 2.5 is support local stormwater capture projects in cities and towns with the goal to increase annual supply capacity by at least 250,000 acre feet by 2030 and 500,000 acre feet by 2040. this is important. So, stormwater capture, we could probably do more than this even. There's just so much water that's running off to the ocean, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but they say the exceptionally wet winter of 2004 or 5, over 900, almost a million acre feet of runoff was captured and infiltrated in the local groundwater basins. That needs to be done a lot more of, and we are really falling down on this. So I'm glad to see they're looking at that. Will they get it done? We will see, but this should be relatively easy. You're going to have more detention basins and the facilities to capture the stormwater. Obviously, there's going to be some capital investment here, but it's really necessary because that water is just being wasted. So so basically, they don't have a dollar amount here. They're committing to this right in this section. So okay, number 3, reduce demand. So this is the conservation component, and what they're saying here is basically just a reiteration of the water resiliency plan. It's conservation. So 3.1 is build on the conservation achievements of the last 2 decades to reduce the annual water demand in towns and cities by at least 500,000 acre feet by 2030. So they talk about towns and cities a lot. They go through the numbers here, and I'm not going to go through this in great detail because a lot of this stuff is already being implemented. It's just being spelled out here. They are going to go through and study this a little bit more and expand some of these programs. But basically, a lot of this is already in place, and they're just kind of expanding existing programs. So I'm not going to dwell on this a lot. 3.2, help stabilize groundwater supplies for all groundwater users, including a more drought resilient agricultural economy. So the one thing that's not addressed here, and let me look at this and I'll tell you what's not addressed, is California irrigated agricultural acreage declined by 1 million acre feet or acres between 2002 and 2017, mainly because there was lack of water. So approximately 8 million acres of irrigated farm and ranch land will shrink by at least an additional 500,000 to 1 million acres between now and 2040. And that will be due to the groundwater, the sustainability plans that it's going to limit the amount of groundwater. This is going to be less food capacity. Now, what they don't talk about in here is they do address it kind of sort of here in the implementation plans. Is they're going to work with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act to protect communities and basically about a SIGMA. And then the second implementation step, support local water demand management that includes changes to cropping patterns and following by building upon this year's investment of $40 million in grants to regional organizations to work to reduce groundwater reliance and create local environmental and economic opportunities through land use changes. They really don't talk about things like the fact that California is growing a lot of water intensive crops in arid areas that are using a lot more water than they could. Alfalfa and almonds are examples of those crops, very water intensive uses, and somehow their pressure needs to be brought to bear to change some of these agricultural practices. So they kind of wave their hands at it here in this implementation step. But kind of not really. And they're also talking about continuing to support conservation water efficiency practices by agricultural producers. So, things like more drip irrigation, less center pivot, sprinkler systems, that type of thing. That's there's a lot of evaporative loss from those two and not very efficient, but that's what a lot of people have. So, Okay, so number 4, improve forecasting, data management, including water rights modernization. So they talk about including the data and forecasting capabilities. This will actually be good because it'll allow them to manage the dams more efficiently, so the water storage. So part of the dam's capacity is to handle floods, and they need to have sufficient capacity to manage floods. And without a good forecast, they don't always do a real good job at managing that, so they release more water than they needed to, and don't have that capacity really to handle and whatever floodwaters they get in don't make up for what they released, and so that's poor, or less than quality forecasting. So they need to get better at that. So I get that. Um, you know, improve the flexibility of current water systems. This is 4.2 to move water throughout the state. So they're looking at improving the infrastructure to move water around. Um, One of the things that I'm not seeing in here uh, in 4.3 is modernizing water rights administration for equity, access, flexibility, and transparency. So this is dealing with water rights, and this could potentially make interbasin water transfers possible, so that you can move groundwater from one basin to another, and potentially open up water markets. They do not talk about water markets in here, and that would be a big deal for California, is pricing water uh, based on its actual value. It's the water right now being bought and sold for interbasin transfer is kind of all over the place. There are some people that track the prices, and it's kind of all over the place. By establishing actual water markets, people could buy and sell water rights, lease the water rights, sell it, for the season when they have too much, and the water price would fluctuate up and down with the abundance. So, and then you could tie in surface and groundwater to that, and you would create a more efficient use of water through the use of water markets. This Not that I can see it. Once again, it may be one of those hand wavy things in here, but I am not really seeing any bow to the actual water markets, and I think they kind of want to steer clear of that. So maybe it's included in 4.3, modernizing water rights administration, but I don't really see it in here. That's just kind of how they administer it, and water rights priorities and curtailing water rights. So anyway, those are the 4 components of the California Water Supply Plan. Um, the state is going to implement this once again, and I've said it 100 times here. Is I'm skeptical they're going to streamline the regulations and actually turn over a new leaf. They have to before it becomes before we basically just run out of water, and we're in danger of doing that, or having areas where they just run out of water, and as the drought continues, we're gonna see more and more of that unless they really implement these things and truly do turn over a new leaf and seriously look at the storage. It's going to be quite challenging. In the meantime, they're going to rely a lot on conservation, which is kind of their default position. But they really need to get going on these things and streamline things. I doubt it's going to happen to the degree they say it is, but maybe it will. I will remain hopeful. So moving smarter and faster, that would really require significant change. Government does not move smarter and faster. Let's just face it. Yeah, I get skeptical of that. Maybe smarter and faster for them, but to people in the private sector, that's not smarter and faster. So that's really what they're talking about here, is moving smarter and faster, and we will see if they can make some of these changes to make some of these things actually happen. But it it's a good start, and the fact that they're at least acknowledging that we need more storage and we need to prioritize that is a step in the right direction. If you're going to implement these things, it's going to take years and years to get through even with streamlined process, it's going to take years. Even if you started tomorrow, it's going to take years and years to implement these projects. So that's a big part of it. Now, all kinds of people signed on to, and have their logos on here, all these fancy logos at the bottom of this report. California All, whatever that is, California Natural Resources Agency, Department of Water Resources, California State Water Resources Control Board, Cal EPA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, all have their logos on here, and they're all endorsing it. And let's hope that they actually take this to heart and actually make this happen. So otherwise, it really is it may be too little too late already, but I remain perpetually optimistic, but at the same time skeptical based on past performance and past history that a lot of this stuff is actually going to happen. It needs to, or we're going to have serious consequences. And when you have whole cities that run out of water, that's not the time to start thinking about additional storage. So let's hope they move forward with this plan as written. There's a lot of details that need to be ironed out. And the biggie going to be is how are they going to streamline the regulations? That's what I see as a big sticking point here. Changing the attitudes, the bias against storage, and changing the getting rid of a lot of the red tape on these projects would be absolutely huge. So we will see if that actually happens. All right, so that is a look at this 19-page document. So you can download it and study it for yourself. Obviously, we didn't go through it word by word, but that's the plan. And on the surface, it sounds good. Through the filter of past actions of the state, you can take it with a grain of salt and a hefty dose of skepticism, because we've seen what they say and what they actually do in the past, and so I want to see some action is really what it comes down to, and we will see if they can act fast enough to really make a difference, because I think there's some serious issues out there that are only going to get worse before they can implement these things, even if they started tomorrow. So that's where we're at. All right. So that is today's show. Thank you for listening. We're back on a weekly basis here. Took a little break for a while. You can reach me at tballard@groundwaterguy.com. I'm always interested in your comments. You can comment on the videos here, like, share. I appreciate all that. You can find us, our streaming channels, the Groundwater Guy channel on YouTube, and then on LinkedIn. I post the events up there on LinkedIn, so you can watch that. LinkedIn is a little bit quirky sometimes, but all my past videos are up on the Groundwater Guy channel on YouTube, so you can go back and look through those, and there's some valuable information there. I know people look at those. If you are interested in being a guest, and I probably need to start bringing some guests on to talk about some of this stuff so you're not hearing me all the time, here is the Book Me link. You can get on there and book a session with me, and we'll talk about that. I'll usually talk to you ahead of time, and we'll agree what we're going to talk about and come up with a game plan, so it's a good interview, and we can get good information out there to the audience. And I'm always interested in hearing anything about groundwater, even surface water, groundwater related issues. A lot of what we talked about today was not necessarily specific to groundwater, but there's some surface water issues, but they're all tied together. I mean, you use more. If less surface water is available, you're going to tap into groundwater. So they all affect each other in their usage. So I'm interested in hearing any of this stuff. Water wells I deal with a lot, and anybody that is a vendor that has something interesting to talk about, groundwater and water issues, I'd love to have you on. So, all right. Thank you very much. That's today's show. I will see you next week. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell if you want to be notified when we have a new video come out, and we will